welcome to this lecture. In our discussion of operating system, and when we talked about the main functions performed by most operating system, one of the basic function that we said the operating system performs is known as file management. Now, it is important to know that file management is one of the most vital component of an operating system, and for convenient use of the computer system, the operating system provides a uniform logical view of information storage in such a way that it abstracts from the physical properties of your storage devices to define a logical storage unit known as the file. Now, it's also important to know that the operating system maps files onto physical storage media, such as either the hard disks or the floppy disks or the CD-ROM, that we use to store information. And it's also the file system that helps us to be able to store, access, and then retrieve our files. So today we shall be talking about file management system. But first of all, let us define what a file is. Now, generally, a file can be defined as a collection of related information that is recorded on a secondary storage medium. And when we use our computers or our phones and we create documents, either a Word document, a PowerPoint document, or an AutoCAD document, or even a video, we record a video. Now, all those informations that we created are referred to as a file because it happens to be a collection of related information that we actually store or recorded on a secondary storage medium. So that is what a file is. And usually, just as I gave an example here, this is an example of a text file. Usually a file has a name with an extension, separated by a dot. So for example, you could have a name. Suppose after writing my final year project and you decided to create a file using Microsoft Office Word, and you decided to store the file with this name, project. If you use the Word document, the extension .doc or .docx will automatically be appended to that file, where the word project refers to the file name and the .doc typically defines what type of file. In other words, this means that your file is a document file, while in the case of these, it's simply trying to tell us that the file is a text file. And usually when you create a file on a computer system, there must be the owner of the file or the creator of the file. Now, having defined what a file is, let's now see what a file system is. Now, a file system simply refers to as the collection of files plus its directory structure. Now, it is important to know the directory structure actually stores the directory information about the file. And it is important to know that it is the directory structure that actually stores the information of where the file is, when the file was created, the size of the file, and so on and so forth, so that we'll be able to retrieve the file at a later date when we so to desire. So it is important to note just from this diagram that you can view the directory structure as an interface, or rather the file system as an interface between the user and the disk. So you can see here that the user actually makes use of the operating system to create, manipulate, or delete files, while it is the file system that actually is in the middle that handles all those, that creates an abstraction and helps the user to either store the information on the file to the disk or also access the information from the disk. So the file system is actually a neatly hierarchical way and order that we can actually store our file. Now, having said that, before I proceed, it's also important to know that I have also given another alternate definition of what a file is. I also say that a file is a sequence of bits, bytes, lines, or records as defined by its creator. Now, having said that, Let's move to the next slide and quickly talk about the different types of files that we have. Now, for the sake of simplicity, even though this is by no means exhaustive, I've decided to group the different types of files that we have in a computer system into four basic types or categories. And the first one is referred to as the text file. In other words, these are files that have the extension of .txt, an extension of .txt, which are just plain characters. Now, when I said a text file is a sequence of characters organized into lines. It's as simple as that. Now, the next type of file is known as the source file. Now, a source file is actually a sequence of functions and subroutines. And it is also important for us to know that it can be referred to as the original code that was used to create a document or a program. So, for example, the operating system that you're actually using on your laptop was actually created using a programming language. So, the actual code that was coded or that was used to program or to create that operating system can be looked at the source file, because it is from that file that the operating system was being assembled, and so on and so forth. Now, another type of file is known as the object file, and these are actually sequence of bytes that are organized into blocks. It will also be defined as a file containing the object code, that is the machine code output of an assembler or compiler. Now, usually when you write a program, the original program that was used is actually known as the source file, as we've defined before. And of course, when you make use of an assembler or compiler to run the program such that you translate the source code that was either written in C language or in Python or in Java into an assembly language, it is actually known to be what we call an object file. And usually object file actually have the extension .obj. And then the last but not the least is referred to as the executable file. So in other words, as the name implies, from the word executable are actually files that we can execute or run on our computer system or phone system or tablet. And this refers to a series of code sections that the loader can actually bring into memory and execute. And in most cases, in fact, in all cases, they actually have an extension of the .exe. But a common example is when you want to install either the Windows operating system or the Microsoft Office suite, and you plug in your, your CD-ROM drive containing the program, and you open the folder, you actually see there's a particular file that has an extension of .exe. And in most cases, that is the file that you actually double click in order to initiate the installation of whatever program that you are interested in. Now, having said that, let's quickly go to the next section and talk about what we refer to as file attributes. Now, another name for this word file attributes is also files characteristics, or the characteristics of files. And in also another computer parlance or language, file attributes could also be considered what we call file metadata. Now, the first file attribute we shall be talking is what we refer to as the file name. Now, generally, you cannot create a file without giving it a name. And a file name is actually usually given by the user, and it is given for the convenience of the human user. Convenient of the user. Now that is that. So every file must have a file name, and like I said, it is actually for the convenience of the user. Now, the next attribute of file is known as identifier. Now, this identifier is actually usually a number that is given to the file. It's a unique number. unique number that is actually given to a file by the operating system, and it is this identifier that the operating system actually uses in order to locate, access, or retrieve a file, while in the case of the file name is for the convenience of the human user, but the operating system itself can only locate, store, or identify a file using this unique identifier. Then, of course, the next attribute is type, which is actually appended to the file name to actually tells us what sort of file it is that we are using. For example, for any web page, you actually have an extension that is added to it as h.html. In the case of Excel, you have .xls. In the case of a Word document, you have the extension .docx, and so on and so forth. If it is a video file, for example, you have .mpeg, and so on and so forth. While in the case of the location, as the name implies, it actually tells us where the file is located in the secondary storage medium. The size also gives us, an idea of how large or small the size is, and of course, this could be measured in kilobyte, megabyte, it could be in kilobyte, megabyte, and so on and so forth. While in the case of the protection actually refers to the access control information. Access control information, and it actually gives us information about who has created the file and what types of access right the owner has given to whoever may want to access the file, whether it's a read-only access or write-only, or read, write, delete, and so on and so forth. So that's what the protection. And then the next is date. Of course, it gives us information about when the file was created, when the file was last modified, by who, and so on and so forth. While this gives us actually the time of the file was also created, the file it was modified, and so on and so forth. While in the case of the user information, it actually gives us who the owner or the creator of such a file is, and the associated right or privileges of what the owner can actually be able to do on the file. Now, it is important to note that all these details information are actually stored in the directory structure. So all these detailed information that I've given here are actually stored in the directory structure. So that is that about file. So just as a way of a quick recap, we said that a file is a collection of related information that is recorded on a secondary storage medium. While in the case of the file system, we said that it is a collection of files together with its directory structure. And we went ahead to see the different types of files, which are the text files, the source files, the object files, the executable files, and we went ahead to see the different file attributes or files characteristics. So that is that about files and file management system, which is one of the main function that the operating system actually performs. So I hope that the information I've provided has been very, very informative, and I would like to thank you for watching.